Podcast, baby. It's the podcast. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm Graham.
And my name is Ashkahn.
That's why I was giving you the eyes. We do an introduction at the beginning where we say our names.
I forgot what my name was for a second.
Okay, and today's question is, what kind of retail, if any at all, should I offer in my float center?
Retail in the float center.
The old R and the FC.
It's a good question. You know, there's
Great question, I'd say.
I would say most float centers offer retail, right? Like it's not that common to come across them that have just nothing, no retail.
You can't see, but I'm making a really kind of face at Ashkahn
Most
right now.
have something, like at least like a T-shirt or.
So like about a year ago, we did like random calls around to float centers.
Yeah.
And we called about 50 of them. And of those, over half didn't offer any retail.
No retail at all.
No retail.
Interesting.
But that's not to say that's what you should do. That was just kind of the survey. So a lot of float centers don't offer a ton. The ones that do, to be fair, very, very seldom do you come across a float center that is offering a huge, extensive amount of retail.
No.
Or that's selling a huge amount of retail. I'm sure that they're out there. In fact, I know for sure there's at least a couple, but they're kind of few and far between. Yeah,
so it doesn't seem like anybody's making it a huge part of their business. You know, your retail is not covering all your expenses or contributing a huge chunk of change to kind of your overall operations.
Yeah, and I mean, even at Float On, I'd say we do maybe an average of around $3,000 a month.
Yeah, like $2,500, something like that.
Yeah, and that's before we take into account how much the retail actually costs. So of course, the profits on that are even less. You know, it ends up being we're making maybe a little more or a little less than $1 per float we run, roughly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just kind of assuming like 50% of that retail money goes towards the cost of the item in the first place.
Yeah. So
you're talking like $1,000, $1,500 a month is the money we're making off retail.
And that seems to be kind of consistent. Again, like when we talk to other float tank centers, other than like I know a retail shop that just happens to have a float tank, right? So like of course they're doing a lot of retail sales, or I know one that has an actual probably 600 square foot designated just retail store area in the middle of their kind of main float center shop. So they're doing okay, but in general, it's very similar. You know, they're not making that much per customer coming in.
I mean, that being said, that's $1,000, $1,500 we wouldn't have otherwise, and we don't put a ton of specific effort into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, not a ton is generous. Like, almost none at this
almost
point.
None. Like we don't. You know, our actual retail displays are okay. They're not great really at all. Like we didn't really set up like great lighting or really set them up to have nice attention to different ones. We just kind of used the space we had and the furniture we had to have some retail out there.
And we're not delinquents or anything. Like
They look okay. We're responsible business owners, but yeah. So it's never been like, you know, a big project for us to really get our retail to be set up super well in the shop and to make sure we're not like actively convincing our employees to be pitching retail at our customers or anything like that. So it's a very passive sort of process that brings us that amount of money in.
And it's kind of hard for it not to be unless you plan from, like, again, unless your kind of base level concept for a float tank center is you really want to have retail, and retail is a huge part of what you want to introduce your clients to, and you believe in certain products or devices you want to be selling in addition to offering floats.
Yeah.
You know, again, unless it's that core to what you're doing, it's probably, I mean, like the reason we haven't thrown a bunch of time into it is just because the return on our floats is so much higher. If we're going to spend time improving something and kind of getting more customers and getting more dollars coming in, it's sort of a no-brainer. It's worth spending the time on floats, and it's not really worth as much time to spend on retail.
Yeah, like if we doubled our retail sales, we're talking another $1,000 a month or something.
Yeah, right. And if we added on like 5% to our float sales, all of a sudden we're making a lot more.
So, I mean, that being said, it is nice to have retail. I like having it. I mean, there's just some cool stuff out there I want other people to have. So, like, it's nice having retail for my own selfish purposes of spreading information on things I think are cool.
Yeah, so what kind of retail works, I guess? Like, so we covered do you even want to offer retail in the first place?
Yeah.
So assuming you do.
I'll say a couple other things, too, before we get into the specifics, actually. Just one more thing I've always thought about with retail is part of why it's difficult, I think, is because you're just limited by how many people are physically coming into your store in a day, right? I mean, like, we, running 24 hours a day with 6 float tanks, can do a maximum of 60 floats a day. So we're talking about 60 people walking through our doors a day at max. I mean, maybe another one or two wandered in for
Off
some
the
reason.
street, yeah.
And maybe like our mailman stopped by. But like
Thought it was a dispensary or something and came in. Yeah.
So like we're just not seeing the sort of number of people that go through a shop that would be more focused on retail.
Nor do you really want to encourage more hustle bustle in most float tank centers, right? Like if your lobby was totally packed while you have people floating, like I personally, at least in our center, would be kind of worried about the noise coming in. So there's like a natural disincentive almost to have more people coming in off the street and milling about.
So that's one thing about retail on the kind of bad side of it. And the one thing I want to say on the positive side of it is that even if you're not necessarily making a huge amount of money off of it, there are other benefits to selling retail. I mean, anytime someone buys something from your shop and then they see it in their house, that's just a time that they're going to think about you. Or if someone asks about something and they got it from your float center, that's going to be the start of a conversation about floating. Or, it's just a way of having those gentle reminders out in the world just by the fact that they bought it from your place. So there's some kind of non-tangible or at least non-financial benefits to selling retail out there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's especially true of things that are specifically float related too, right? Like float books.
Right.
Giant 50-pound bag of salt. Things that directly relate to the float tank, I think, are obviously going, like, having a coffee book that's related to floating is going to bring that more to mind than maybe just having a pair of color therapy glasses or something like that.
So yeah, let's talk about the specifics here. Let's start with books, because there's a decent number of float books out there.
Right, and we sell a lot of them, so we might as well talk about that.
I would say our best-selling products are these books that we personally publish. So there's a number of books ranging from John Lilly's books.
All of them, which I think there's, oh gosh, I'm going to get this wrong now, 12 or 13?
Uh-huh. And how many specifically about float tanks?
So the Deep Self is really the most float tank related book.
Yep.
And they get mentioned in a ton of his other stuff. Even some
Right.
of the Dolphin books make reference to float tanks and things like that. But yeah, the Deep Self is definitely and Tanks for the Memories, co-written with E.J. Gould is kind of the other one.
And then outside of John Lilly books, there's the Book of Floating, of course. So that one is, probably the most like, here's a book to get you from zero to some information
Literally
about
called
float
the
tanks.
Book of Floating.
Yeah, right. So that one's good. I mean, we have a number of like books created from our various like artist programs at our shop.
Yeah, art book, cookbook, all that self-promotional stuff, which we could go into.
Yeah. So outside of those, what other float?
There's the Float Tank Cure.
That's right.
By Shane Stott.
Shane Stott. And Emily Noren's book, Unsinkable.
Yep, that was exactly what I was going to say. So thanks for stealing that one.
And I'm sure there's a few more little ones out there, but that's a relatively comprehensive list of float books you could have. There's I guess like James Nestor, Get High Now, mentions float tanks in there. It's like we've had that in our shop, and it's just a fun book to sell. So at the end of the day, none of these books are like flying off our shelves, right? We're not like carrying an entire bookcase full of one of these books because we're selling them so quickly.
They sell about as well as Altered States. Maybe even a little less well.
No, I'd say the Book of Floating sells better than like Altered States does.
Which we also carry.
But but really, like, if someone buys one of these books, that's pretty much like, in my mind, the best thing you could sell somebody. Like, it might not necessarily be making us the most money, but it means that person is about to know a whole bunch about float tanks.
Yeah.
So totally. Like, you're basically selling someone an opportunity for them to like go out in the world and talk a huge amount and very accurately about float tanks out there. So I'm always stoked when we sell float specific books, and I like carrying float specific books for that reason. I mean, even if they don't buy them, but they just know they exist and later get them from a library or something, you know what I mean? They're doing that double duty of spreading information and spreading good, accurate kind of from the source information.
Some of our best sellers that we have are, and really I guess this is a good lesson, it's related to either kind of playing around with your senses or human optimization is kind of what I find
for
a
us.
lot of, for us is
I think that's specifically to our center. I mean, maybe we'll take a little bit of history. Like, we started with selling a lot of more spa-like materials,
towels and robes and
nice soaps, stuff like that. And it didn't go well at all for us. And I think it's probably because we don't really have a very spa-like float center. Like, you don't walk into our float center and feel like you're getting this nice, pampered, quiet voice, babbling brook in the corner sort of experience. Like, you come into our place, we're like, hey, you're here to float, like the walls are bright yellow. And so I just don't think we weren't giving that vibe off. Maybe we're not exactly attracting that type of specific floater to come in. And so our kind of more spa-like products just, they were just pretty much sitting there. Like, they did not do very well.
And and maybe it's just that's the case for other float centers that I've talked to have kind of gone that route too. But a lot of just float tank specific places that aren't also wellness centers or kind of day spas or something like that. I've kind of heard similar things, that it's just a little bit harder to sell those, like things that you would see at your normal hairstylist or even, again, spa or something like that, maybe are a little harder for the float crowd. I think we have just a slightly different group of people coming into your average float tank center. Again, unless it's sort of attached to a more general wellness practice or something a little more robust.
Yeah, and for us specifically, I mean, the stuff that does seem to have sold well is exactly what Graham was just saying, like things that I think mess with your senses, and yeah, I think there's just overlap in the audience of like people finding out about floating and people finding out about kind of human optimization stuff.
And a lot of people, who come in are either sort of sensory tourists and want to get a sense of what the heck is going on in this sensory deprivation chamber. And then other people who come in really have a concrete problem like back pain, or they want to work on themselves a lot and want space to do that. And I think finding products that are in line with both of those journeys for us has ended up going really well.
Yeah, and for us specifically, really the two products that have sold kind of better than anything are color therapy glasses. So those are the ones that the various colored glasses that you put on that kind of supposedly alter your mood based off of the color that you're seeing through them.
Yep, and so, we have like 10 different colors from, green and magenta and indigo to yellow and orange and things like that. Yeah,
but they're really fun. You come out of your float and you put them on, you look outside and everything looks weird and it's just like really, they're fun to play with on the spot. You can immediately try them on and, see the effects. You don't have to think take this home and in a week you'll understand why this is cool.
And they're a relatively low price point.
Yeah.
So it's a nice just little add-on. Someone came out of a float, they put on some crazy pink glasses and they're like, I would love to wear these out on the street right now.
And they look super fly. You look awesome in them. And so those sell really well for us. And then On-It products are the other things that sell really well. And, I'm sure a big part of that is just due to kind of Joe Rogan being a very big middle of the Venn diagram between float tanks and nootropics and On-It specifically.
Yeah, and I'd say Alpha Brain still sells better than any of our other On-It products, I believe.
Yeah.
And the markup on those is not quite as good, just with supplements in general. That's often the case. So those make the most revenue for us, but the color therapy glasses make the most profit.
And and you don't sell as much on it, but the amount of profit you make per thing for some of those high priced items. I mean, like a 90 count bottle of Alpha Brain is not a small price tag.
And it's, On-It itself, again, maybe because of the Joe Rogan crossover, but has been successful enough. And we've tried carrying other supplements as well. But at this point,
briefly,
we really kind of doubled down on a lot of On-It things. So we carry not their full line of products, but a good number of them.
Yeah, and they seem to do a good job of actually pushing people to buy things locally. So I think they list prices the same on their website, but you have to pay shipping. So there's kind of an incentive for people to actually go into stores and purchase the products. So we get people who want to buy something, look up where to buy it in their area, and then come to our float center for the purpose of buying on it.
And rather than where am I?
Yeah.
What did I just wander into?
Which is interesting. That kind of goes both ways. I'd say some, people definitely have discovered our float center because of that, which is interesting. No one looks up color therapy glasses and then goes where can I find these in Portland?
Or towels.
Yeah, right. That's just people discovering them as they come to our shop. But On-It will drive people into our float center. And sometimes that's cool and they'll find out about floating and they'll try floating. And other times they don't actually seem to really care about floating.
Yeah.
And they'll literally come in and buy On-It and leave, and we'll never actually have them float, which is interesting.
Yeah, they're like, oh, it was a cool art gallery or something. They have no idea what we do.
That's genuinely the only product we have that does that. Those two at least kind of for us, and we haven't done a huge amount of experimenting recently, grabbing new stuff and trying stuff out really, but those two have they've always been pretty stable and pretty successful for us.
Other things that we know that different float tank centers like and that we've either sold before or currently sell, we have Miracle Fruit.
Yeah.
Pills, which are awesome and convert your sour taste buds into sweet and kind of make everything that's sour taste sweet for about 2 hours, which is another one of those play around with your senses type things.
Right. And, we've had other I think one of the other interesting things about retail is that I
was going for like a quick list of products, and it's going into philosophy again here.
Okay, I mean, other products we have. We just recently started selling some water bottles with our logo on them, like some of the swaggy stuff we have.
Yeah, a lot of centers sell T-shirts with their logos.
We did T-shirts that did not have our logos, which I really liked back in the day. We actually had artists come and float with us, and then had them do T-shirt designs, kind of inspired by floating. That didn't have our logo incorporated or anything. They were just kind of sweet T-shirts, and we sold those, and those are really awesome things to sell.
So kind of swag. I know hats and sweaters and things like that, hoodies. So kind of clothing in general for float tank centers.
Yeah.
There's I think it's like Kalen Wolf is actually kind of popularizing the, is it Colorado hemp honey? Is that what it's called?
Right. Yeah, they were just at the float conference, and a lot of people heard about them there. And we just started carrying those in our shop like a week ago.
Just recently. And but I think within the last 6 months, there's been a lot of other centers that have kind of started carrying those. And
or some form of CBD honey.
Yeah, CBD honey. And I've at least heard from other places that lots of times their conversion on individuals floating to that, like even pre-float kind of CBD honey stick has been going really well.
Yeah. And I guess that brings up the topic of food in general. We have kombucha in our shop that we will sell, and we'll give it for free to members. And we've had other food before too, like kind of nice, like vegan fudge bars and just kind of things that are like very, I guess, on the decadent side and things that would just be awesome
almost in a
to have after a float.
Yeah.
And those have been cool. I mean, they've been good in the sense that I think they sell better than the other stuff that we have, but they come with extra hassle in terms of expirations and handling and so I don't know. I guess we just never really put in the effort to make a big crack at having different perishable things.
Also, whenever we've tracked our perishable sales, it's almost always our staff members buying them at their staff discount, and that's 80% of the sales is
eating fudge bars every day.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's true.
I also just I don't know why this didn't come to mind earlier, but my favorite retail item that we sell, which I think every single float center should sell, and I think is hilarious, is 50-pound bags of Epsom salt.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we just are the cheapest place to get 50-pound bags of Epsom salt in town, because we don't care. We buy it in such a bulk. We're selling it essentially for cheaper than a lot of people get agricultural grade, which is crazy. But we're selling it for what, $35, $40, a bag. And people come in, like massage therapists come in, will just come in specifically not to float, but leave with 2 50-pound bags of Epsom salt from us, which is always, to me, just the most hilarious purchase that someone can make. So if you're not just selling your bags of salt that you have sitting around, you are missing out.
Yeah, definitely. And I've seen other places on go as extreme as having juice bars and stuff like that are part of their float centers. So it almost feels like you got to get to that kind of further extreme to really
and I've heard those go really well too.
I mean, it sounds great to me, like having awesome juice coming out of a float.
I'm sure we have a juice spot right near our shop called Cure, and I'm sure they just kill it with post-float sales over there. It does. It sounds like one of the best things you can have out of a float. So if you do have room to incorporate almost another service into it, like a juice bar, that's a cool thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, okay, can I go back to my philosophy?
Yeah, what's your yeah. Go back to the philosophy.
Here's my philosophy is that I think it's really hard to sell stuff that you don't know about or care about. And I think it's a lot easier to sell stuff that you know about and care about, even if it has nothing to do with float tanks. And that is almost more of a guiding principle than anything. Because if there's something that you genuinely are like, man, other people need to try this, I think it's awesome. You're going to be able to be in your shop and talk about it like that. And you're going to know what you're talking about. And you're going to seem like you genuinely want people to have this. And it's because you do genuinely want people to have it. And we've done this before with, there's this line of mushroom supplements that Paul Stamets makes. And they're really cool. And we got really into them.
Host Defense, yeah.
Host Defense is the name. Yeah. And so we got really into learning about mushrooms and watching this dude's talks and going to his talks when he came to Portland and doing all this research. And we started carrying their whole line of products, and we were selling them, because people would come in and be like, what is this? And I'd be like, let me tell you about mycelium, And we get to go really into it, and people were buying it because of that fact. And then, we stopped working in the shop as much, and our shop is now
didn't care about it as much.
Yeah, it was run by employees, and they weren't quite into looking into it or didn't know much about it, and they pretty much almost entirely stopped selling. Got to the point they were just sitting on a shelf, and no one had sold one in such a long time. They were like, should we just get these out of here? And like to me, that's a really important lesson. Like you could sell, almost anything if you care enough about it. And if you have something that you don't care anything about, you're going to have a tough time selling it almost no matter what it is.
It reminds me of one of our friends' stories about working in a call center. And he said when he was working there, the buddy he was sitting next to, kind of his desk buddy at the call center, just decided to try and sell these little like screen rag things that like no one ever saw. Like one of their like little goals they're supposed to do is like upsell people on products, and one of the products was a little thing just to wipe down your screens. And like within the course of a week, he was like the best-selling screen wiper in all of North America, just because he mentioned it every single time. And so yeah, like if you actually go out of your way, you really can sell everything, even tiny little screen rags.
Yeah.
Which is another retail idea,
Yeah,
little screen.
get those screen
Everyone
rags.
has screens these days. No, it is. And just to actually tack on something useful to what you said,
All right.
is along the lines of being passionate about what you carry. It's a great opportunity to get your staff involved too, both in terms of like give out free samples. If no one in your shop has tried something or doesn't own their own color therapy glasses, they're probably not going to sell color therapy glasses that well. And similarly, almost all of our best-selling shop products have always been a suggestion from a staff member, not out of our own heads.
Yeah,
so as soon as we
sure.
just started like listening to our staff and they were able to sell things they're passionate about, it went a lot smoother for us.
Definitely. And I guess keep experimenting. Add new things in as you find them. Take things out that are just wasting space.
Never quit.
Never
Never
quit.
surrender.
Yeah.
Excellent. And as always, if you guys have any more ideas for show topics, go to floatanksolutions.com/podcast and type them in there, and we'll be talking about them sometime in the future.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.